All right, a very good morning, everybody. Just let me check if we are live. Give me a moment. Right. We are live now. Welcome to the Weekend Verbal Hackathon. I've curated a set of questions for us to go over today. But before we begin with the drill, allow me to give you a quick introduction to the Unacademy platform, the Unacademy portal. Right. So, Unacademy is perhaps India's largest learning platform today when it comes to preparing for any sort of competitive exam. This YouTube channel is particularly for management exams such as CAT, GMAT, NMAT, SAT, and the likes. I am Prankur Arora. I am going to be your instructor on this journey of learning. I'll be taking you through various aspects pertaining to uh, verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions of these exams. I've been in the learning industry for the past couple of years where I've worked with organizations, consulted with organizations such as Marico Limited, ITC Limited, PGCIL, FMC Corp, Becton Dickinson India, very many organizations, different aspects of learning and development that I essentially catered to. I am even a published author. I wrote a book called It's Not Funny. It got published a couple of years back, even garnered favorably positive reviews from the likes of Papa CJ and Biswapati Sarkar, satire legends in the industry. I hold advanced certifications in facilitation from an American organization called Leadership Management International. LMI is perhaps the world's largest organization working in the space of transformational leadership. You know, and I co-founded a startup by the name of Thought Sutra. Thought Sutra is essentially an initiative working in the space of creative arts, working for the betterment of creative arts in our country. So, if you've got that creative bone and you do check it out, it's an amazing space to be in. So yeah, that's pretty much about me. Welcome aboard this learning. I'll be essentially taking you through various aspects pertaining to verbal ability as well as the reading comprehension portions, right? So there are quite a lot of features that add to the pedagogy of an academy. Some of those features include giving you access to daily live classes on the portal, on the Unacademy platform, where all kinds of interaction with the educator happens in real time. Chatting, engaging in discussions, doubt clearing, and even question answers. They're conducted in a very interesting format of live polls, right? Uh, all the live tests and quizzes, they're conducted in order to help you evaluate your performance, in order to help you develop perspective about your learning journey, perspective about where you are versus where you ought to be, right? All of this in order to help you understand where the room of improvement lies, because we give you very interesting data and very interesting insights. Stuff like how much time you're spending on every question, stuff like your topic wise scores, your section wise scores, all that. Plus, all the courses on the platform, they're structured courses, they're audited by subject matter experts, created by subject matter experts. And with one subscription, you get unlimited access to anything and everything. All kinds of live and recorded courses that you can watch from the comfort of any of your devices. The educators on the platform, these are highly credible people. They've as I said, they've mentored thousands and thousands of aspirants successfully into various top tier management institutions. Your IIMs, MDIs, XLRIs, ISBs, you name it, they've cracked it. And you can experience all these live classes, for free. Start learning from the best of educators. Uh, before you basically make a decision as to whether you want to avail the additional key benefits that come along with the subscription or not. New batches, new courses, they keep on going live on the platform. Language is never a barrier either, because we've got educators who are teaching in vernacular languages as well. So if you're not as comfortable in English, I'm pretty sure you can find somebody who's teaching in a regional language that you were brought upon, right? And as I mentioned, uh, the idea essentially being that you can participate in all these live polls that we conduct over the platform. Question answers, they're conducted in the format of live polls, right? Plus, you'll see throughout the lesson I'll be scribbling a lot of stuff on these class notes. So all these class notes with the educator annotations, they're made available to you once you subscribe to the platform. Talking of subscription, these are the various subscription models. You can clearly see that as the time period of your subscription goes up, the cost of subscription per month is going down. Plus, if you use my name Prankur, Prankur, you get an extra 10% off on any of the subscriptions that you're going for. Having said that, let's begin with the first question of the day. This is a sentence elimination question. So, out of these four, only one does not make sense. Which one is it? You have to figure it out and hit me up on the chat with your answer. Alright, I trust that you've read the sentences by now. Let's go over them. Patrilineal ownership of lands and the culture of dowry attached to it have turned daughters into bad dates. The control of such castes on local politics aggravates masculine hubris. The bigotry of our village culture and polity is intrinsically linked to a control of land and agriculture. Land makes certain castes kingly in rural communities. So we can clearly see. Let's try to form some links, right? Let's try to form some links. Okay. The control of such castes. What castes? What castes are we talking about? Right. Uh, Plus, we have a mention of land in C and D. So we can clearly see the bigotry of our village culture and polity is intrinsically linked to a control of land and agriculture. Land makes certain castes kingly in rural communities. We're talking about bigotry, we're talking about village culture, and we are saying all of it is linked to the control of land. And then we are explaining it further by saying that land makes certain castes kingly in rural communities. So C and D are a link, and we can clearly see that D will follow C because it explains the point that that sentence C is making, right? Land makes certain castes kingly in rural communities. The control of such castes. What castes? These certain castes. The control of such castes on local politics aggravates masculine hubris. So B will follow D. D is mentioning land makes certain castes kingly and the control of such castes. What caste? The caste that sentence D is mentioning, right? So we have CDB as a link, CDB going together, right? Sorry, this was a parajumbles question, not an odd one out. I don't know why I said that. Patrilineal ownership of lands and the culture of dowry attached to it have turned daughters into bad dates becomes the conclusion then. So we have CDBA as the order as the arrangement. So this is a sentence arrangement question, sentence rearrangement, not sentence elimination. My bad. So CDBA is the most viable answer option, is the most viable arrangement of these sentences, right? Let's move on to the next question. This one is a sentence rearrangement question as well. Right. I hope you've read the questions, the sentences by now. We can clearly see that either it begins, the paragraph here begins with either an A or a C, right? So let's read these out. The mandate of heaven indicated divine approval of a king's right to rule. In other words, the mandate of heaven gave divine, in other words, in what words? Yeah. What is this trying to paraphrase? In other words, the mandate of heaven gave divine ruling authority to kings that lived a moral life, administered justice, and protected the welfare of his people. Whereas medieval Europeans legitimized their ruling authority by the divine right of kings, Confucian societies used a similar concept called the mandate of heaven. However, it differed from the divine right of kings in that heaven's endorsement depends upon the virtuous conduct of the ruler. So, either it begins with an A or it begins with a C, right? Now, C is where we are introducing the phrase mandate of heaven. Read it out loud again, right? Whereas medieval Europeans legitimized their ruling authority by the divine right of kings, Confucian societies used a similar concept called the mandate of heaven. So, the phrase mandate of heaven, the concept mandate of heaven is being introduced in C, right? So, C becomes the opener. C becomes the opener, and then we follow it with A because A is defining mandate of heaven further. Mandate of heaven indicated divine approval of a king's right to rule, right? So we have A following C, right? And then we have a D where we are saying, however, a contrasting statement. However, it differed from the divine right of kings in the heavens endorsement depends in that the heavens endorsement depends upon the virtuous conduct of the ruler. This virtuous conduct is being defined in sentence B. So we have CADB as a possible arrangement for this. Why? In other words, right, what is the virtuous conduct? In other words, the mandate of heaven gave divine ruling authority to kings. Number one, that lived a moral life. Number two, they administered justice. And number three, protected the welfare of his people. So, heaven's endorsement depends upon virtuous conduct. Virtuous conduct is being defined in sentence B. So, CADB becomes the most viable arrangement of these sentences. Alright, I hope this makes sense. Let's move on to the next question. Identify the sentence that is incorrect. Very, very important. We have to identify the incorrect sentence. All right, let's go over this question now. Every day I watch many news channels, including those which are popular and those which are not popular, right? So, those which are popular, those which are not popular, these are both parallel. So, this is a correct sentence. Popularity of football is more than cricket's. What are we comparing here? We are comparing popularity, right? We are comparing popularity. Popularity of football is more than cricket's. So we have an apostrophe s here. This apostrophe means we are talking about cricket's popularity, right? So even this sentence is parallel. So we are cool with it. Sachin played in the test series against Australia tenaciously, tactfully, and with patience. So, if you look at it closely, we have a list here, right? How did Sachin play? Sachin played number one, tenaciously, number two, tactfully, number three, with patience. So, with patience, we know for a fact is not uniform in construction. When we look at tenaciously and tactfully, we need and patiently. And patiently is what would have made this sentence parallel as well, right? So this one is incorrect. A tiger cannot catch a deer as fast as a cheetah can. We are talking about capability. Tiger can't, cheetah can. Again, tiger can't, but cheetah can. So these are parallel as well. So even this sentence is correct. The only sentence which is incorrect is sentence C, because the these are not uniformly constructed. Right? How did he play in the test series? He played tenaciously, tactfully, and patiently, right? Not with patience. All right. So this was, essentially a parallelism question. Tested you on the rules of parallelism. Let's go over another sentence rearrangement question, another parajumbles question. All right, so we can clearly see, you guys, that here from the options itself, it's very much visible that either the paragraph begins with A or the paragraph begins with C, right? That's very very apparent to us. You can clearly see that. General Yi knew that the Ming dynasty was more powerful than Mongols were and judged that if he attacked, the Ming would likely invade Korea. Or, due to his prominence in 1388 CE, the anti Ming pro Mongol faction sent General Yi to expel a contingent of Ming troops stationed on the northern part of the Korean peninsula. So, as an opener, we can clearly see that it's sentence C, where we are laying down the context of anti-Ming pro-Mongol faction. We are talking about General Yi. We are talking about the Ming troops, right? So, all of this is being laid out in sentence C. So, C right now looks to be a more viable opener than A, right? Sorry. Uh, C looks to be a more viable opener than A. Why? Because we're talking about the time period, we're talking about the forces being anti Ming or pro Mongol, we're talking about General Yi, we're talking about Ming troops, we're talking about the Korean Peninsula. So, all of the context for the entire paragraph is being laid out in C, right? So, let's look at C as the opener right now, right? Now, we either have a CA or we either have a CB. B is upon his arrival in Kaisong, but we know for a fact that Kaisong as a capital is being introduced in D. So, D has to come before B, right? We have DB as a link, seeing the campaign as a potential disaster. General Yi turned his troops south towards Koryo capital Kaisong. Upon his arrival in Kaisong, General Yi toppled the government. So we know for a fact that DB is a link, right? Plus in D, we are talking about campaign as a potential disaster. Why is it a potential disaster? General Yi knew that Ming dynasty was more powerful than Mongols were and judged that if he attacked, the Ming would likely invade Korea, right? So this kind of stems the disaster that sentence D is talking about. So A will come before D, and we know for a fact that B will follow D because D is introducing Kaisong, and in B we are talking about what happens in Kaisong, right? So therefore CADB, or rather option 2, becomes the most viable arrangement of these sentences, right? Let's move on to the next question. Now this is finally a sentence elimination question. Right. I trust that you've read the sentences by now. There is a special intimacy to poetry because in this idea of the art, the medium is not an expert's body, as when one goes to the ballet. In poetry, the medium is the audience's body. Okay. In such movement, in in what movement are we talking about? In such movement at the image, in such movement, the image fully becomes an intellectual and emotional complex because it dramatically exists both in the space of description and in the time of musical structure. Okay. The luminous details in poetry must not only be precise, they must also be rendered so as to elicit and reward a dynamic sense of movement. Poetry's centaur, the thinking word arranging, clarifying faculty must move and leap with the energizing sentiment, musical faculties. With the energizing, sentient musical faculties. Right. So, out of these four sentences, we can clearly see, uh, sentences B, C, and D are all talking about a sense of movement. In such movement, right, a dynamic sense of movement, poetry, centaur, the thinking word, arranging, clarifying faculty must move and leap with the energizing, sentient musical faculties. So these three sentences, B, C, and D, are all talking about a sense of movement, whereas sentence A is talking about a different concept altogether, a different thing altogether. There is a special intimacy to poetry because in this art, the medium is not an expert's body, as when one goes to the ballet. In poetry, the medium is the audience's body. So it's talking about a different thing altogether, and therefore, this sentence is the odd one out of the four. B, C, and D, all of them are talking about a sense of movement. A is talking about a different concept altogether. All right, let's move on to the next question. This is essentially a para summary question now. Right. So let's read the passage out loud now. Much has rightly been made of the problem of political polarization. Wait. Right. But not nearly as much has been said about the problem of political homogenization. So, two problems, polarization and homogenization. Both are toxic to public discourse, while the former is political polarization, while the former makes for awkward conversations at the family dinner table, the latter buries difficult conversations. Where agreement is sought without a decent discussion, opinion corridors form, limiting the range of ideas tolerated in public discourse. Where all views are not heard in appropriate discussion, the only alternative is inappropriate discussion. And populist rhetoric cuts through this muffled discussion culture like a hot knife through butter as the pent up need to be heard surfaces. So, there are two, three things essentially that we're talking about in this paragraph. We're talking about two problems. One problem is where we have conversations that lead to the forming of opinion corridors that limit the range of ideas that are basically tolerated when we talk about political polarization. And when we talk about political homogenization, we are talking about how we are burying conversations, right? We are burying conversations. So let's look at the four options as summaries and follow the process of elimination. Option 1, political ambivalence is as harmful to public discourse. Are we talking about political ambivalence? No, we're not. By subduing discussion, political homogenization can lead to the rise of populism. Uh, Again, we are talking about political homogenization leading to the rise of populism, but we are not really talking about polarization here. So we have to address both these things, not just homogenization. So we'll eliminate option 2 as a possible summary. Option 3, when opinion across the political spectrum is not heard, public discourse is crippled. Seems like a general summary. I think I can go ahead with this. Still, I'll put this on the back burner and read 4. Political homogenization is as much a cause for rise of populism as political polarization. So understand that when we talk about populist rhetoric cuts across this muffled discussion culture like a hot knife through butter as pent up. See, when we talk of populism, homogenization as a cause of populism, that cause effect relationship between populism and homogenization is not really established in the paragraph. All right, even though homogenization and polarization both are mentioned here, but homogenization as cause for populism is not really mentioned in the paragraph, right? So therefore, I'll kill option 4 and I'll go with 3, where we say when opinion is not heard, public discourse is crippled, right? This is essentially a very viable summary for this entire passage, for this entire paragraph. Hope this makes sense. Let's move on to the next question, which is again a sentence elimination question. Okay, I trust that you would have read these sentences by now. Let's look at which one does not fit in with the rest. Forecasters say that in just 2 years, the total quantum of e waste generated around the world will be 50 million tons. In China, for instance, 73.9 million computers, 0.25 billion mobile phones, and 56.6 million televisions were sold. Close to 90% of the world's electronic waste, worth nearly this much, is illegally traded or dumped each year to destinations halfway across the world. While Europe and North America are by far the largest producers of e-waste. Asia's cities are fast catching up as consumers of electronic goods and as generators of e-waste. All right. Right. So, which one do we think does not fit in? See, understand that D and B are clearly a link. Why? Because D is talking about while Europe and North America are by far the largest producers of e waste, Asia's cities are fast catching up as consumers of electronic goods and as generators. Consumers of goods and generators of waste in China, for instance. Right? For example, is basically a follow up to sentence D ka Asia cities ka mention, right? So B will clearly follow D, right? Now we have to figure out of A and C which one fits in with the both of them and which one does not. Close to 90% of the world's electronic waste, worth nearly this much, is illegally traded or dumped each year to destinations halfway across the world. Forecasters say that in just 2 years, the total quantum of e-waste generated around the world will be 50 million tons. Right? So A fits in better because A is talking about e-waste generation around the world will be this much, right? D follows up by saying Asia, Europe and North America are largest producers. Asia is catching up as consumer and as generator. B gives an example of an Asian country. C is basically the odd one out because C is talking about illegal trade and dumping, right? C is talking about illegal trade and dumping, which is something different altogether. Though C is also talking about electronic waste, but in a different connotation with different ideas. So therefore, ADB makes better sense than C, right? So therefore, C is the odd one out. C is the one that we'll eliminate out of these four. All right, let's move on to the next question. All right. So we have to choose the correct sentence out of these four. Now, this is a subject verb agreement question, SV agreement question clearly, right? Now, the rule for each, when each is part of the subject, when your sentences begin with each, then your verb is singular, right? But here we can clearly see that each is coming after the subject. Each is not the subject, it is coming after the subject. So when it comes after the subject, the verb takes the form of the subject. If if the subject is plural, like in this case, your verb will have to be plural. But if the subject is singular, then your verb becomes singular. So when each accompanies the subject, the verb takes the form of the subject, right? But when each is your subject, then your verb is singular, right? So they each They is plural, therefore verb has to be plural. Have is plural, have is plural. We'll eliminate options 1 and 3 altogether because the verb is singular in these cases. We have option 2 and option 4, rather option 2 and option 4. They each have their own story to tell makes better sense because we are talking about a plural subject, so we need a plural pronoun. This is a singular pronoun, so this does not make sense either. Therefore, fourth option is the better option in this case. Right. Let's move on to the next question. Another parajumbles question, I think. Yeah. Right. So let's go over these sentences and let's figure out what is the best arrangement for these. We can clearly see that the option from the options itself that either we begin with D or we begin with C. The quest for an empirical understanding of consciousness has long preoccupied neurobiologists. C says in January 2010, while driving from Chicago to Minneapolis, Sam McNerney played an audiobook and had an epiphany. So C is a better opener clearly because we are laying context for what the paragraph is going to be about. We're talking about a trip, we are talking about the time period, we are mentioning the subject, which is Sam McNerney, we're talking about an audiobook and an epiphany. So C is laying down better context. Now, after C, we know for a fact we have A. Why? Uh, the book was John Lehrer's How We Decide, and the epiphany was that consciousness could reside in brain. So we are talking about epiphany here, and we're talking about epiphany here. So A is clearly a great follow up. Now we also know for a fact that B and E have to go together, right? He was a 20-year-old philosophy major at Hamilton College. The standard coursework, ancient, modern, and contemporary philosophy enthralled him. So we know for a fact BE is a link, right? BE is a clear link. We know that for a fact. अब अपने को समझना है after A do we have D or we have F? F says, but McNerney was no neurobiologist. Uh, D, the quest for an empirical understanding of consciousness has long preoccupied neurobiologists. So D clearly has to come before F, right? Why are we talking about McNerney as neurobiologist? We have to lay some groundwork. We have to lay some context for it, right? So we have D and F coming after C and A. The book was John Lehrer's How We Decide, and the epiphany was that consciousness could reside in the brain. The quest for an empirical understanding of consciousness has long preoccupied neurobiologists, right? So after A, we know for a fact we'll have D. Hi Jaya, welcome to the lesson. CADFBE is a better arrangement than option 2. Why? Because see, understand, F says but McNerney was no neurobiologist. Usse pehle we have to lay some context, right? Why are we talking about neurobiologists? We have to form a link between understanding of consciousness and neurobiologists, and then we can claim but McNerney was no neurobiologist. Are you getting my point? DF makes better sense than FD, right? Because D is laying down context, D is establishing a link between understanding of consciousness and neurobiologists, whereas F is not. I hope you've understood this, right? Let's move on to the next question, which is a sentence correction question. Choose the correct sentence. I think 3. Okay. 3 is the correct answer. Neither the king nor his ministers desire war. So, whenever we have a neither nor construction, neither X nor Y, our verb always takes the form of Y, right? The noun or the noun phrase that comes after nor is what goes in tandem with the verb. Because this is plural, our verb has to be plural. Therefore, we'll eliminate options one and two, because the verb here is singular, whereas Y is plural, right? Now, both 3 and 4 tell us that the verb is plural, which is all right. But you know, the third option is talking about a specific king, right? We are saying neither the king nor his ministers. 4 says neither king nor his ministers, right? So we are talking about a specific king. That specificity is being made clear in option 3 and not in option 4. Therefore, 3 is the correct answer. Good job. Next question. Right. Tropical bats play an important role in the rainforest ecosystem. Now we have a list beginning from here. Number one, aiding in the dispersal of cashew, date, and fig seeds. Number two, pollinating banana, breadfruit, and mango trees. And number three, indirectly. So there are three things that tropical bats do. They are aiding, they are pollinating, and what is the third thing that they do? They are aiding, they are pollinating. And the third thing is they are helping. They are helping. Alright, so if this is a list of verbs, then all three have to be parallel with one another. We need aiding, pollinating, and helping. So we have pollinating, but this is indirectly help the see, producing is not parallel with pollinating. Helping needs to be parallel with pollinating. So this is incorrect. We'll eliminate option A. Pollinating, yes. Indirectly helping. This seems like a viable answer option. Pollinating and help. So this is incorrect. Pollinate, help. Pollinate and help are parallel, but they don't go well with aiding. We have a continuous form here, right? So we'll eliminate D as well. Pollinate, helping. Again, this is incorrect because pollinate and helping are not parallel. The only option which is giving us parallel forms of the verb is option B. Pollinating and helping are parallel with aiding here, right? So therefore, B is the correct answer, right? Let's move on to the next question. This is a sentence elimination question, right? You have to pick the odd one out. Right. Let's solve this question now. I hope you've read the sentences by now. You will know that it has because you will know that it has. What has? Because you will start experiencing aha moments with respect to that problem. Once you admit that your unconscious mind is the source of whatever brilliance you possess, you can take steps to extract the maximum possible benefit from your association with it. Okay, we're talking about unconscious mind here. What you must instead do is interest your unconscious mind. What you must instead do, right? So, this is a contrasting statement, right? Instead of what, right? Contrasting statement. Working on a problem, your conscious mind, and working on a problem by working on it with your conscious mind, what you will quickly discover is that it can't be ordered about. What can't be ordered about, right? So we know for a fact that from B and C we are talking about unconscious mind, but C is uh, a contrasting statement, so it can't be the opening sentence of the paragraph, right? What can be the opening sentence? Only B can be the opening sentence of the paragraph. Once you admit that your unconscious mind is the source of whatever brilliance you possess, you can take steps to extract the maximum possible benefit from your association with it. Okay? You can take steps to extract the maximum potential benefit from your association with it. What you will quickly discover is that it can't be ordered about makes sense as follow up to B. D will come after B. And then we have sentence C. Just give me a moment. And then we have sentence C. What you must instead do is interest your unconscious mind in working on a problem by working on it with your conscious mind. Right? So BDC is a clear paragraph. A is the odd one out. Plus, you will know that it has because you will start experiencing aha moments with respect to that problem. What problem are we talking about? No problem is mentioned in B, C, and D. You will know that it has. It has what? Right, it has what has, because you will start experiencing this. Sentence structure does not really make sense. It is not going after B, it is not going after C. Even if unconscious mind is what this pronoun it is referring to, you will know that unconscious mind has because you will start experiencing aha moment. There is no sense, there is logically no sense, because we don't know what problem we are talking about. Plus the pronoun here does not make sense, right? So BCD is a paragraph and A is the odd one out. Next question is a reasoning question. Alright. A report that many apples contain a cancer causing preservative called ALR. Which of the following, if true, best explains the reason? Sorry. Which of the following, if true, best explains the reason for the apparent discrepancy described above? So we know for a fact that the paragraph is basically giving us a discrepancy to resolve. A report that many apples contain a cancer causing preservative called ALR apparently had little effect on consumers. Few consumers plan to change their apple buying habits as a result of the report. Nonetheless, sales of apples in grocery stores fell sharply in March, a month after the report was issued. So, what is the situation? What is the status quo? What is the premise in the paragraph? What are we talking about? What is the premise? The premise essentially is that we are talking about a report that has come out which tells us about cancer causing preservative called ALR. This cancer causing preservative called ALR is present in apples, right? But it has negligible, it has consumers are indifferent about it, people are not worried about it. Still they are saying that sales have gone down. Sales of apples have gone down, even though we know for a fact that consumers are not worried about this report. So there has to be some other reason, right? Out of these four options, the option that gives us another reason for the sales going down will best explain the reason for the discrepancy, right? So let's follow the process of elimination and figure out which one describes the or which one explains the discrepancy. Option A. In March, many grocers removed apples from their shelves in order to demonstrate concern about their consumers' health. So what are we saying? We are saying grocers removed apples to demonstrate concern. right? If grocers removed apples, right? If grocers have removed apples, for a fact, grocers have removed apples, then how will people buy apples? Right? If grocers have removed apples, how will people buy apples? And because people are not able to buy apples, the sales go down. So A looks like a viable answer option. Let's look at B, C, and D and figure out if we have a better answer to this. Because of a growing number of food safety warnings, consumers were indifferent to such warnings. Because consumers are indifferent, then sales should hold steady, no? Why did the sales not hold steady? So this is not explaining the discrepancy at all. We'll eliminate B. C. The report was delivered on television and also appeared in newspapers. Are we concerned about the media which was used to deliver the report? No, we are not. Does not explain the discrepancy at all. D. The report did not mention that any other fruit containing ALR, although the preservative is used on other fruit. The report did not mention that any other fruit contains ALR, although the preservative is used on other fruit. Are we concerned about other fruits? No, we are not. We are only concerned about apples. So we eliminate D as well. So A looks to be the best answer because it tells us that, what? Grocers removed apples because people could not buy apples, so the sales went down. Right? A very, very logical explanation. Let's move on to the next question. Another sentence elimination question now. Right. So I trust that you'd have read the sentences by now. Let's go over them. Sentence A. What we call fundamentalism has always existed in a symbiotic relationship with the secularization that is experienced as cruel, violent, and invasive. B. Historically, wherever secular governments were established to separate religion and politics, a countercultural movement developed in response, determined to bring religion back into public life. Okay. C. In the developing world, secularization usually came with colonial rule. It was hence seen as a foreign import and rejected as profoundly unnatural. And D. All too often, an aggressive secularism has pushed religion into a violent riposte. Right. So, my friends, we are essentially talking about a paragraph where we are, talking about secular ideals with religious fundamentalism. Right? We're talking about secular ideals with religious fundamentalism, right? We can see that for a fact. Now, when we talk about secularism with religious fundamentalism, essentially what we're trying to get at is that A, B, and D are all talking about secularism and a pushback, a religious fundamentalist pushback. Whereas C is the only sentence which is talking about how secularism came into being, right? That it was brought with colonial rule. All the other sentences have no reference to colonial rule or its roots in colonial rule, right? So C is talking about a different concept altogether. Therefore, we can eliminate C. Whereas A, B, and D, all of them are talking about secularism and the religious fundamentalism or a violent pushback in the form of religion. Right? A, B, and D are all talking about that. C is talking about its roots in the colonial rule. Right? So therefore, C is the odd one out. C is the only sentence that does not go well with A, B, and D. Right? Let's move on to a Parajumbles question now. Right. Let's look at these sentences now. Let's figure out what is the best possible arrangement of these sentences. Also, we can see from the options that either it's going to be beginning, the paragraph begins with A or the paragraph begins with C. Creating a balance of power and fostering regional stability could help to realize commercial goals. Hence, these became the core of the British Empire's strategy, is what sentence C says. A says the main driving force of British Empire's global expansion was the pursuit of commercial interests. Right? When we say that the main driving force was pursuit of commercial interests, C is talking about how that pursuit was coming into being, probably. That creating a balance of power and fostering regional stability could help to realize commercial goals. Hence, these became the core of British Empire strategy. Right? So, A is a better opener than C because A is talking about the main driving force of the global expansion. Right? That entailed helping the weaker side. What entailed helping the weaker side? Right? what entailed what entailed helping the weaker side? That entailed helping the weaker side in order to promote a regional balance of power and preventing the rise of a regional power, or at least reducing its impact on British security and interests. Right? We are talking about regional stability, right? Creating a balance of power and fostering regional stability. So C and B go together where B follows C, right? B, C and B go together where B follows C because B is talking about promoting regional balance of power, right? Hence, these became the core of British Empire strategy. The strategy entailed helping weaker side in order to promote a regional balance of power, right? And then we go ahead with D as the closing statement. So ACBD becomes the best possible arrangement of these sentences. D becomes the conclusion. Britain put these practices to use in its continental policy for hundreds of years. All right. So, with this, we come to the end of today's class, you guys. Thank you so much for joining this Weekend Verbal Hackathon. I had quite a lot of fun taking you through these set of questions. We'll see you again Till then, stay safe, stay strong, and stay mellow. As always, uh, take care of yourself. Right. Bye bye.